Well, welcome to our programme, the Weekend Review. You probably can't see behind us, we had a bit of snow going on. It was very, very picturesque. But what is more picturesque is our panel, and my co-host, of course, Chris is here.
Everything but picturesque. But we shouldn't be here, should we? Because the police said you've got to stay at home.
I know.
Goodness me. Very, very strange message.
Anyway, who we got?
Rob Callister, MU chairman, and very much tied up with tourism, as always, and we'll be talking about that in the third part. And Andrew Smith, who's as a member of Treasury, delighted to see him a member of the House of Keys, and I'm sure contributing a great deal.
So he wants to do a section on the budget. I think we should do that first.
Yeah, to start with, and it's great that Andrew's with us on this one, but I don't want to repeat the same things that have been well covered in the media since Tuesday. What I want to do is scroll forward and look at what's called the indicative financial plan, which stretches out over 5 years, and I have real concerns about it.
You've gone through the Pink Book, I gather, then?
Yes, indeed. Well, I do, always, as a matter of course.
Things can get, well, for lay people, it's hard sometimes to find these details out. So do you have to probe to find this? Or do you
No.
It's quite obvious when you look at these numbers.
I mean, Jodie did say that she found the presentation difficult. I think to some extent it is, but it's slowly getting better, I think, in terms of understandability from a lay perspective. But what concerns me, and I should explain, the indicative financial plan gives us a forecast, the Treasury's forecast, from now effectively to the end of the term that the present membership is sitting. And there are a number of key things that concern me. One is the forecast employment costs, and they're predicted to only go up at 2% per annum, when in fact we know currently
inflation's at 6.
At 6.
Yes.
And then, even more remarkably, we have the issue of non-employment costs forecast to go up only 1% per annum. And I just don't believe it, frankly. And I just wanted to examine that side of it. When on the revenue side, we go up between 2.5% to 3% on an indicative basis. But also we have this rather unusual item called health and care funding gap. And as somebody who's produced commercial accounts for many, many years, I smiled. I think this is perhaps a gentle way of putting it, when I saw that an income gap was actually placed down as revenue, and I thought that was lovely. But it rises, this gap rises to 35 million by 26-27, which is a very significant amount of money. So I think to Andrew first, could you perhaps talk to this funding gap? It's a significant amount of money. Where's it going to come from?
Well, obviously, we've come through a very difficult situation. As you appreciate, I'm not making excuses. I came into the House in September. A lot of the budget was already, the parameters were set, it was in train. What we have spent an enormous amount, as you know, with the pandemic, which I think no one would disagree with, and we've done our very best through that as a small nation from the reserves that we had, and that's only as a consequence of good governments in the past. We've done very, very well. Many jurisdictions in our position have had to borrow to actually satisfy some of the things that we've done. But what we're looking to try and do is, during this administration, over the next 5 years or so, just under 5 years now, is to recognise the challenge and actually try to reverse some of the issues that have passed historically in lack of funding in various areas. And to address that, then we have already said, and we've stated clearly in Treasury, that there will be a requirement to continue taking from reserves to fund, especially the health gap, as you're talking about there, but also to try to equalise the incomes that we're getting from various revenues, so that in the end, after the next 4.5 years, we should end up with a balanced budget again. The last thing that anyone wants to do, and we're only birds of passage in any administration, we're only here for a short time, and the last thing that anyone would want to do is to leave a debt burden for future houses and future generations. So that's really what we're trying to do generally with this budget on the long term.
Listen to what you said there. Do I understand correctly that some or all of this gap that we talked about, which rises to 35 million in 1 year, 26, 27, are you suggesting it might come out of the National Insurance Fund as a reserve? So
as far as we're aware at the moment, we've done that in the past, and I didn't agree with it then, and I don't agree with it now, and I don't believe my current Treasury colleagues agree with that now. Yes, this year we've taken some money out of the income from the National Insurance Fund, but only the investment income, not the capital.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, a lot of people, that's also a problem, isn't it? But that word raiding.
Well,
is used.
I mean, if you utilise it for health, and it's a National Insurance Fund which is normally gained for health, then I can't see an issue. I can't see an issue as long if you're raiding it. I think the word raid would mean that you were using it for various other reasons other than health, and I don't believe anybody could argue that we should not help to support all the care workers and everything that they've done and I'm talking of all levels from at both ends of the scale that they've done throughout the pandemic to ensure they've got the facilities and the equipment and the medical aids and things they need for going forward. To take that from the National Insurance interest, I don't believe that.
But this is the fund that will run out, isn't it?
No, it's not a fund. No,
no, that one's all right. Is it? 'Cause I thought we keep hearing that.
That's not the fund that will run out because that's ring fenced. The National Insurance Fund is ring fenced, right? So it's the income we're talking, not the capital, just the income element that we've managed.
The last time this was done was for Noble's Hospital to be built, wasn't it?
Sorry,
when the hospital was built.
That's the fund that was. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Which again, I suppose you could argue, well, that was a health facility, but again, it wasn't in my view in those days. I didn't believe that should have happened. But
when's the next actuarial report on the fund due?
I don't know when that is, but what I can tell you is obviously you'll know from your time in government there's a 5-year process of investment managers that we have to have for the.
No, actuarial report is where you assess the value of the National Insurance Fund in years to come, because currently the fund is perfectly capable of supporting pensions, but I think, and Paul's alluding to this as well, really, it's the making sure that the fund is there for our children and grandchildren, and that will require not just the basic amount, but it'll require the investment interest to be turned into it as well, which is back to my point about how you fill this health gap, because insurance, national insurance, it's either tax or national insurance that has to go up, or it's taken out of NI. It's got to be one or all of some of that.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
And if we're talking about an increase in, for example, tax to pay for it, that would be 12%.
It's a lot, and this year.
And likewise, if it was national insurance, it would be 12%.
Specifically this year, we've not increased any in national insurance contributions, as you appreciate, and we try to keep taxation levels at the same as well. We recognise how people have struggled so far in this, through the pandemic with furlough and one thing or another. So we try and let's try and get
with the UK putting up
keel.
NI. Was that not an easy one to go for? We should follow the UK.
No.
Just because it's just easier to do that, isn't it?
Well, it would have been very easy. Yeah. In actual fact, we could have taken the soft option and said, well, the UK has done it, so we'll automatically do it. But we know we've taken a stand.
We did separate our assessment of how our NI fund worked from the UK some years ago, which was the right thing to do. My gripe for a long time, and I've said this at almost every budget debate when I was in the House for the last 4 or 5 years, and Rob will perhaps recall this, and that is that our threshold for entering into paying national insurance is much lower than the UK, and our exit is also lower. So effectively, we're putting a lot of the more of the NI payment burden on lower paid people, and I hope that becomes part of the review that Treasury's in.
This is part of the review we're looking at, as well as reviewing that situation and obviously income tax rates. We're also looking at this whole review of the benefit system so that there's more equality throughout that. That is currently ongoing now.
Just to open it up because we haven't heard from Rob yet. What's your thoughts?
I'm quite happily listening. I mean, myself personally, I think taxation is probably the route. I think it'll be through having to increase our working population. I think it's something we have to look at. You know, based on the census report, we know that report is telling us that we are got more people working on the island at the moment as we've had previously, but that has to continue to increase over the next few years. Chris is absolutely right. We've got future problems with some of the funding models. I think we do need to look at full review of our National Insurance Fund. I think we've got to look at that. We've got to look at how people pay. You know, as Chris rightfully said, we are hitting some of the low income. And at the moment, when we've got these inflationary pressures coming through, I think it's absolutely right that we start having these reviews. I mean, what inflation at the moment is 6%. That's the highest figure since August 2011. Government has to be really warning about these things. This is going to really affect household budgets. Chris is absolutely right again, as we said, talk about these reviews. These are the big decisions and the big reviews that government's got to take in this administration in order to set the foundation for the next administration.
Yeah, I mean, when Alf was Treasury Minister, he did enter, I think it was called a SAVE programme, I can't remember. Yeah. And he struggled, really.
Well, they tried to save £25 million and they couldn't do it.
Right, so the point being here is taking that concept of not being able to save money inside departments. I bring you back, if I may, Andrew, to this issue of the very low increases you've apportioned over the next 4 or 5 years to public sector staff pay. And we've currently got a situation, even in the news in the last few days, about concern amongst teachers and their pay. And again, I don't want to be sort of a when-I, but I mean, I raised this issue about the need to drive higher incomes to the lower earners inside the public sector. The operational frontline staff needed to be recognised in terms of their salary increases. And yet here we are squeezing it. Now, do you honestly think, really, does Treasury honestly believe that inflation's going to bumble along around about 2% for the next few years?
Well, no, we don't. And in fairness, when if you see when the inflationary figures started to rise, it was after a lot of these figures have been put together. And in fairness, we've got to look both sides of the coin here. Yeah. And I'm quite sure Treasury would have reacted in a different way. Had we known that inflation at 6% now had been that in November and December, then you would have seen a totally different budget.
I'm sorry, I'm going to come in there, Andrew. I don't think that's correct. I mean, the government uses CPI figure for September for setting housing rents and other things. We know that figure in September was 5%. We know when we look at this budget, one of the mistakes that I think in this mistake is the setting the Manx state pension. That was clearly set at 3.1%. Yeah. But we used the triple lock, and that's what the UK used. They used three different mechanisms, either 2.5%, or earnings, or inflation, whichever is the highest gets applied. Now, we know the September figure in the Isle of Man was 5%, but we only applied a 3.1%. That is hitting some of the most vulnerable who's just living off the Manx state pension. And that, to me, was an oversight in this budget. Well, it's one of the few. Because let's be fair, this budget was a very steady budget. There was no real shocks and bangs along the way. But that was one of the oversights on this budget I felt that the Treasury Minister had made.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he has certainly considered it, and we believed from all the information that we gathered that was as fair as we could be. We had to break, as with the UK, we had to break the triple, and we apologised I've apologised to many pensioners, both in my constituency and when I met them out around the island. But there's just no way that, as you're also already talking about the figures there that are very low and the percentages that are low, and there's no way that we could have funded something in the region of about 8%. Had we gone with triple lock and not broken it for this 1 year only, and it is a guaranteed 1 year only, then we would have been in a situation of having to squeeze other people even more to give the pensioners that
I think
they would have been on 8%.
I think based on the fact that government uses that September figure for quite a few other increases and setting the bar, I think it was absolutely right. And that does go back to Manx Utilities. You know, the Tynwald strategy on setting our energy prices relates to the September figure. So it's there, it's in black and white. Everybody uses it. It's used as benchmark. Well, on this occasion, I think just on that part, I think the government got that one.
You've been selective. You've been accused of picking your month, are you, basically?
Well, no, it's always the same month. It's always the same month.
Central government uses the September CPI figure, and we've known that's been historically low, and now it's started to increase. And I think we're starting to go through this really increase on inflation, and we need to just be aware of that. And I've said it in my budget speech. Government need to monitor this very carefully. It's up to 6%. I expect that figure to increase further in the next few months as utility costs especially start to factor in into household budgets.
I think we've got to be fair to Treasury in the sense that this first budget of the new House, really, you guys came in when a vast amount of the work had already been done.
Agreed.
And that's a fair point. But I take you back again to this issue about forecasting. I don't think it was, even based on September numbers, was it remotely sensible to jump for a 2% increase in salary costs each year over the next 5 years, because again, 5 years ago, just as soon as the UK had left the EU, in each budget speech thereafter, and you can check Hansard, I was saying we now need to be very careful and cautious because there are going to be inflationary issues building into our wage demands. It was forecastable 5 years ago. We didn't respond to it then. I was saying, watch out for teacher and nursing pay because it's going to, in the future, going to be a problem. And yet here we are, much further down the line, and it's not just the Brexit influence. It's the short-term supply chain inflation problem which we've got. We've also got demographic issues, and I think this, with the exception of Rob here, we're a perfect example of an ageing population. I mean, there is an aging.
I'm agreeing with that, Paul. I think that's a fair statement.
There is an ageing population.
Where's your glasses?
They're in my pocket. And a reduction in the number of young people, a significant number of these young people leaving the island, difficulties in bringing more people over because of housing. So the supply side on the economy in terms of young people coming into work is going to be really demanding, and that will itself reflect on a salary and wage inflation process. And then, as I already said,
you've actually said there, Chris, all of those problems you've got, these are everything this government's got to start to tackle.
But they haven't seen the numbers.
We've got to find a solution to bring our students back. We're losing 1 in every 2 students, as I said in the budget programme. That cannot keep happening. We've got to attract them back. We've got to build housing. You know yourself in your time, government spent around £70 million replacing housing stock, especially for social housing. That has now got to transfer into bricks and mortars of new property. The Isle of Man has invested very little in new properties over the last 15 years. We've got to now do that. We've got to have landing stations. So if we bring teachers, we bring nurses, bring doctors, they can land here. They've got somewhere to stay until they settle into island life and then go on their way to buy their own house and settle in our community. And that to me is one of the fundamental things this administration's got to do. That is why it is so important that Chris Thomas and the Housing and the Communities Board start to deliver strategies and policies as a matter of urgency and not get to the end of the administration and then start to limper over the line with these policies. These need to be in place within probably 18 months.
Just as a side, away from you for a second, this whole thing about teachers and leaving, the amount, is it a headline number? I mean, I know people, they can leave 3 times a year or whatever, but is that the sort of thing you're talking about, where people can't come over here to work?
I think there's always been shortages in areas, and now that this is also happening in the UK, we're having to go further afield to find the skills. And we're going to have the same problem when we look at trying to bring back our tourist sector. Something as simple as that within hospitality, within tourism. But when you put more skills, when you talk about your doctors and you talk about your nurses, and teachers, we've got to really try to capture them and say, listen, instead of coming to the UK, come to the Isle of Man. This is what we can offer. And that it's always been a struggle, but I think it's going to get a greater struggle over the next 18 months.
People can get houses, yeah, definitely.
Well, picking up what Chris said about, you said I was saying this 5 years ago, I was saying it a long time ago. So yeah, we know the problem, and it's been a growing problem. So we're now in a situation where we've got this major problem on our doorstep. which we're now trying to get all the various components in place. Chris Thomas has in his Housing Communities Board, as Rob's just mentioned. We've got to get all these in place, and we've got to now try to reduce the problem that you were talking about over the last 5 years in literally a blink of an eye in comparison, if we are going to try and turn the island back from where we seem to be.
I will add, we're also in a period of recovery. But it should be said, this budget was an okay budget. It had good things in it. It did increase the personal tax allowance. It did actually, from my own point of view, it gave £1.2 million to motorsport, 500,000 to tourism to market it. It did increase many benefits on the island. But the question goes back to originally what Chris said about that 2%. Have we set the bar at the right level, given all of the inflationary targets and pressures that's coming down?
No, isn't it? The answer is no, because
I think the answer is probably
people are going to be taking pay cuts.
But we've got to be fair to government. How much have they actually spent over the last 2 years protecting particular sectors in order for them to recover and bounce back, hopefully in 22. So government's got a real problem here to balance everything. We've got to get through this recovery. We've then got to look at the rebuilding of the island.
Yeah, I'm not criticising the current budget. I think it's been indicated as something of a standstill, a beginning of a new administration, and I respect that. My challenge is, if we're going to face up to a problem, we first of all got to recognise it, and it's not recognised here yet in the numbers. My argument for a long time has been that this problem has been coming for some time. It's now accelerating very, very significantly. Here I'm talking about frontline services being funded properly. And I've always felt, somebody spent a lot of my life in the private sector, that the way you deal with even above inflationary pay rises is to ensure greater productivity in the organisation. And that is something governments fail to do. Even up to very recently, we were still seeing numbers increase in government instead of numbers decrease and having better paid people. And I looking at, particularly back to this issue of the funding gap for the health service, it's something of a shock when you see that the CEO's office in Manx Care is going to cost £18 million a year, and equally the DHSC corporate costs are in the region of £5 million. So we've split it, but we've got £23 million worth of cost in high-level administration and corporate services, and I think that's got to be challenged.
Agreed.
Government's got to find a way of driving the funds to where they really need to go.
Well, I think that's always been the case. Obviously we're heading up towards the first anniversary of Manx Care. I think from the ordinary person in the street, I think they want to start to see some change, and I don't think they've seen that. One of your sort of descriptions in the past is a juggernaut. It hasn't changed its course. Are we starting to see reduced waiting list? Are we starting to see some additional services being applied? Are people feeling that our health service is heading in the right direction? I would say no at the moment. But at some point we do have to stop, and we'll have to challenge that. Are we getting value for the health service that we have on the island? And I think that's going to happen probably in the next 6 to 12 months.
Andrew, what was the thinking behind increasing non-payroll costs only at 1% per annum over 5 years? Where did you think the savings were going to come from there?
Well, I'm not sure of the detail, in fairness, because I'm not trying to duck out of the question, but I don't know all the detail because obviously I wasn't involved in that particular area.
Right.
But what I would suggest is that these, what we've tried to do again with this is give an indicative view of what we're trying to achieve and trying to believe will be the position at year one. When I'm talking year one is 2021, as we're 21, 22 we are now.
Well, no,
vis-a-vis
the budget's 22, 23.
Yeah, well, 22, 23 vis-a-vis where we're going to be in 26, 27. Down at the end of the. And the thing is that, as you know, with a forecast. I mean, it's like a weather forecast. As you know, yesterday's a prime example, a weather forecast, right? We get the weather forecast, batten down the hatches, almost a red warning, and the thing slips. That's another story.
After you're out in the snow.
The thing slips south. Yeah. Sadly, so other people got it right. So
it's prediction.
It's a prediction
on the best
with the best information and the best will in the world that we have at this particular stage. It's an indicative.
All right.
figure that we've tried to give people a chance to say, look, we've put our island plan in place, we've put a 5-year plan in place to support that. So give us the opportunity to, cover a majority of the areas, but give financial support to those areas. And the other ones, I'm quite sure, are just indicative of what may happen. But I'm quite sure you will see these figures.
I think it's
change.
Thank
No,
you. Well, I think it's wishful thinking.
You hold me
actually.
to this, but I'm quite sure you will see some of these figures over the years change.
Yep. Yes.
As times, as Rod says, as times get it, because we've got to, this island has got to become a place that people want to be here again. But we've got this. How can anybody come to work, live, enjoy an island if you haven't got a house to live in?
Can I just come in on that? Because I still do not believe that we should be setting percentage increases, because if you're on £100,000, a 2% increase is significantly more than somebody on 30,000, 20,000, 2%. And I think that is something the government's got to do, because you do see it when you see the salaries of the top executives. They may be entitled and they may feel they're worth an additional 2%, but 2% on £100,000 is incredible compared to 2% on somebody on 20,000.
Well, that could well
and that is something, and that to me is where maybe the Treasury Minister and the government needs to look at maybe a step approach. Because if we want to keep our young teachers, our young doctors, our young nurses here, then we have to look at that, and maybe we need to flip it around a bit and actually just on the budget. I would just like to say I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing David Ashford's stamp on the next budget, because it will be his budget, it will be his, and I'm expecting this budget to completely change over the next 12 months when it has David's stamp of approval on it.
If I can come back to this issue of productivity, that's got to happen in the next 5 years, otherwise there really is going to be deep concern about
I accept that.
But on this issue of non-employment costs going up 1% per annum predicted, a reasonable proportion of that costing will be government paying contractors, external contractors, on the basis of this company or that company submitting its tender bid. But those companies, for example, cleaning companies, they will already be factoring in the fact that government said, by the way, you've got to get your people within this period up to or above the living wage, which for a number of companies will be a significant cost increase. So what I'm trying to say is, how do you factor in you expecting only a 1% increase in costs when you're actually telling these companies, understandably, because there always was going to be an important issue of getting low wages higher, how are you going to, as it were, bring two ends together on that one?
Good question.
Well,
take a breath.
I mean, you what you guys are saying, what the government is saying, and I don't want to sort of wag my finger, so I shouldn't do that. But
I'm sure you will.
What government is saying is, if it expects the private sector, where you've got lower paid staff, to significantly increase their wage payments, those companies must, by definition, then massively improve their productivity, which is difficult for those sort of companies
or
to
pass
do.
the costs on,
or they pass the cost, or they
make cost
which increase inflation
again.
So often running.
But then government, for its part, is saying, well, hang on a second, we're going to keep our wage burden pressures down, and I just don't think that you're going to be able, under the current methodology of improving productivity.
Let me have a go at something, because 2% and all this sort of thing, and inflation's running at 6%. I'm talking about pensions now. How do you juggle that one? Because that's going to be hitting a lot of people, isn't it? With a pay cut.
It is, yeah. And we've tried to support people, including pensioners. Obviously, that they would satisfy the criteria with the various winter fuel payment allowances, and it may well be that there has to be some other consideration for further support, especially with when what Rob will be talking probably later about the Manx gas prices and things.
Oh yes, we'll do one on that. But 2%. So you pick this thing of 2%. That's when inflation was running. But clearly, by the time the budget's delivered, we're at 6%. So people on fixed incomes are going to see a massive shortfall in what they were
That's right.
expecting.
So
right?
say we will try to help. I'm quite sure we'll try to help where we can. But again, there's a limited amount.
Yeah,
There's only, the cake is only so once. The cake is only.
But
so
carers got 5%, so there was different numbers being used on different amounts.
Well, yeah,
The carers allowance went up by 15%, which I thought was fantastic. I think that was absolutely right.
Some people got 5%. I mean, there was all sorts of
Child benefit went up 5%. Other benefits went up 5%.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at it, taking into account what everybody knows about the triple lock, I don't know when government set that 2%. I think they just pulled the figure from somewhere, because if you look at all the data, the inflation rate was above, was around 5% for a few months before that. So I'm not entirely sure when and how they picked that 2%, and then obviously applied the 3.15 or the 3.1% in the budget.
Well, I think the truth is going to be in our next budget then, really. Okay. Hopefully it'll have a significant amount of home truths in it.
I think you'll also see, Chris, in fairness, that there may be modifications on
Tweaking
on the road. No, modifications on the road to the next budget as well.
Right.
One final point
Okay.
on budget issue, and it's something you raised with Tim Crookall yesterday, day before, and that was apportionment of costs. And you'd asked Tim, why was it effectively that road tax revenues, etc., coming in were £3 million more.
3.5.
3.5. Was it 3.5? Was more £3.5 million more than was actually being spent.
They don't get the money.
And
It
Tim
just goes in the
said,
pot.
more or less, which was a strange thing for him to say, well, it's nothing to do with me, it's Treasury. And I was lost.
I was a bit. Yes.
So is Treasury telling DOI
Who's
that
wagging the dog?
they can't spend the money that the drivers...
No, not to my knowledge. I mean, what we've done, we had the round of department meetings in November as normal, and we gave everyone a financial envelope. And the budgets that were all set themselves that they wanted to spend or whatever, we agreed between us what we could do. We gave them that financial envelope and said, right, you go away and deliver those services.
So
now, Treasury are not in a situation to micromanage, as you know, a department. Now, if they go way off...
So he's saying it was up to Mr. Crookall to spend that money how he wants to.
If they go way off course, then we need to
He
get
didn't
involved
give that
again.
answer, I don't
But
think.
the
No,
other
no,
thing
no.
that we're trying to
Maybe I'm wrong.
change, the other thing that we're trying to change in Treasury on in this new Treasury and Minister Ashford's way is to say, well, wait a minute, this is the budget you get. Don't be coming back to us in 9 months down the line and saying, oh, sorry, that's all gone, we need more. You need to continue interaction, ongoing with Treasury to say, alert us, give us the notice we need, say, hang on a minute, this is not enough, this is not adequate.
But they're also working
No
on
good.
2% increases per year and all things, which again 2% is going to be completely out of kilter, isn't it? Don't you think?
I think there was some. I think some got more, but yeah, I mean, it was at the time of and I'd say, don't forget. In fairness, now give us another 3 months, and the next year's budget will be starting to preparation.
yeah.
May, June, the next budget will be starting in preparation. So, in fairness, we keep talking about this 2%, but it may well be that was already in train back a year gone.
Okay.
May.
Now, it seems to me, listening to you carefully, that there's going to be a problem ahead. And I want to use that road tax thing and the differential between the revenue and the income of 3.5 million, because all drivers know full well that there needs to be more money spent on the road. We all know that, on the roads. We all know that. But if you look at the DOI numbers, which you're saying they're in control of, they've got a corporate cost of around about 4 million. So if we were being a little bit mischievous, one might say the drivers of the Isle of Man are paying for the corporate costs for DOI. Now,
why would you think that? Why would you get that?
Now, if it is
if you've got that devious man, if you wish to do that, fine. But I'm saying to you, right, I'm saying to you as it is.
No, let me finish.
I'll tell you as it is.
I'm sorry, but you two look like you're holding hands. Sorry.
I'm going to tell you as it is.
Go on, get
I say, not Chris, Mr. Robertshaw. I'll tell you as it is, right?
Tell him.
We have given each department an envelope with money in it, right? And they have got the discretion to spend that money as they desire.
Right. Now, that's the problem.
That's a huge.
Now,
point you're making there.
But
You might get in trouble for saying
within the criteria that they've already said to us, so we're looking to do this capital project, whatever it may be. There's a criteria there. And they say, now you spend that there. But we have alerted them and said, if you need any more on any of this, do not come back to us at the last minute saying, sorry, we had that 500 million, but we've overspent it. We need another 20. No, we're not having another promenade situation. We're not having another Liverpool landing station.
That's capital.
Yeah, we're not having it doesn't matter to me whether it's capital or revenue. We're not having another situation where they come back and say we need more.
Okay,
Right,
well, you're on tape now. Remember that you're on tape.
But listen, there's a
I
point.
wouldn't say if
I know that's what I'm saying.
I wouldn't.
It's good and very positive to see that reaction.
I am passionate about
Oh,
it,
I can
and
tell.
I would not
Yeah.
be saying it as a member of Treasury.
Yeah.
And I hope I don't offend the minister, but I said I wouldn't say anything that I would regret later. I'm
This is very positive.
I'm passionate about it, and I will ensure that from my influence in Treasury that they are held to account, because Rob will agree with me. You pick out every manifesto that you got from the last election, and how many people talked about accountability. Yeah.
Right.
I need to.
He's got one more go.
I need to finish.
Scrutiny and
Okay.
all these things.
He wants one more go. There you
I
go.
need to
Go on
finish. I need to finish my point. Back to this difference on spending money on the roads. This £3.5 million that I'm mischievously saying goes off to the corporate side. You, Treasury, from what you've told me here, are determined to say to the departments, it's up to you. But what worries me hugely about that issue is that if the departments, the seniors in a department, are responsible for apportioning funding, historically, over all the years I was involved in politics, it seems to me that the establishments inside the departments always protect the establishment of the department and don't push enough funds forward to frontline services and wages and salaries at that level, rather in favour of protecting themselves. Now, how is Treasury or government as a whole going to ensure the departments don't carry on doing that?
Well, because they will report back. There's a reporting mechanism back to Treasury as well during the period, right? And if I see something, I say, well, hang on a minute, what's happening on this line? You know, what's happening on this budget line here? This something's gone awry.
Do you get
here.
monthly reports?
We will be doing, and I'll be challenging, right? Because I'm also in this Treasury. I'm also chairman of the investment committee and critical infrastructure committee, right? So I'm watching both. You're looking at me very.
No, you got, I heard that.
Are you not? Are you not?
It was a bit. It was a bit.
I am
You're
listening.
looking very
I am
offensive.
listening. I am listening carefully
Intently.
because
You
I'm
listen.
not convinced
Yeah.
that there is a mechanism in the system to ensure that the departments stop looking after themselves as establishments, as head offices, if you like, rather than saying, how can we, the centre of these organisations, make ourselves...
They can't help it, Chris.
Far
They're all
more...
going to look after their own money. That's what happens. You were in there.
No,
Everyone's after their pot of money, and they want as much as they can get, and they'll hold on
Their
to that.
duty is to serve the public of the Isle of Man.
Yeah, but that's just...
Which is, no, let me finish,
Yeah.
which is to ensure that maximum funds go to teachers, nurses, road repairs, everything.
Yeah.
That's where the money belongs. We talked earlier on about £18 million fees inside Manx Care.
Yeah.
£18 million, which isn't going to go to care, it's going to go to the administration. £5 million in DHSC.
Yeah, well, as I said, as Rob's mentioned, I mean, and we mentioned that, and obviously Manx Care was set up before I started, so I'm not ducking the question again, but what I'm saying is that we have said there will be a review after a year, and if Manx Care have not performed, then
It costs 5 million, and they've got to save 4 million or
Yeah.
something.
No,
There will-
DHSC.
There will be
is-
there will be. I'm telling you
Yeah,
now, in
right.
this new administration, everyone is key.
is very
There will be
positive.
challenges. There will be challenge. People will be
I
more.
trust you,
There will be
Andrew.
more
Right.
challenge.
I
I'm
trust
telling you, and I will be one of those that challenge.
Just two things to wrap up. First of all, you may think this is all blokey talk. We did ask Jodie Farragher and also Claire Christian, amongst others. Unfortunately, they couldn't fit it into their diaries on the Saturday when we record this. Secondly, I want to know about this all or nothing, which keeps coming up. You know, the budget. You vote for it or against it, and you can add to this as well. They're talking about changing it. Are you in favour of being able to have more say in what goes through, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, from a department point of view, you do get a great input into how that budget's put together. Obviously, just from a department point of view, from a statutory board point of view, I think it is difficult to get through that document within the 2 weeks, but as members you learn, you have to put time aside, get through it. I think it can be made easier. I think, you know, even though I do have some finance qualifications, I find it quite difficult. So to make it more simple, make it more easy would be great. And I've already fed that information back to the Speaker. And obviously I'll speak to the Treasury Minister sometimes. But at the moment, it's all or nothing. I'm happy to, in this particular one, if there was something that went fundamentally against a principle of mine, I'd vote it down.
That was going to be my question. I mean, how much of a principle has it got to be to vote it down up to now?
Appendix 9 was one of the things that I felt really strongly about, that I thought the DOI increases, there was no explanation to them. They were very high. I spoke to them.
All these things like carb.
I spoke to the minister.
Yes,
I gave him warning of this to say, have you seen Appendix 9? Do you know what these are? He came back to me. He gave me reassurance. He then stood during the actual present in the budget to say, listen, they're addictive. We're not going to apply them. But thanks for spotting them. So it's absolutely right. If it came to a matter of principle, I would vote it down, no problem.
I think there will, as I say, again, this is a new. There are, I think Chris will recognise there are some changes in this pink book that you've noticed since the pink books that you're used to.
Yes.
Easier to understand.
Yes, improving.
So okay, it's a slow process. You may be.
So my question
is looking at me again. So what I'm saying is that process is continuing to evolve, and we're going to make it even more easier for people to understand how the money is spent, how it's allocated, where we get the figures from, etc. So, and there'll be more and more interaction between individuals and departments. So we're looking to do that as Treasury.
So
and as I mentioned in the sit-in, that Treasury officers have always been willing to, not just budget time, but any time of year, to say, hey, what, you've got a problem? Right,
my door is open.
Sit down. We'll take you through it.
Would you like to see it being broken down, or are you happy with this all or nothing?
No. I'd welcome it. I'd welcome to see an analysis. I'd welcome to see analysis which everyone's had chance to plenty of input, and then you get the overall document because they've seen the analysis.
Our political system is any political system would have a problem where there could be allowed massive bun fights at the point at which you no a budget.
Where we come down to a really small detail on a constituent issue, it could be on anything.
But you'd be having, in fairness, Chris, you'd be having those bum fights. You'd be having those bum fights out with the debate.
Precisely.
You'd be having the bum fights with the people round the table, and then into departments, and you'd be settling all that, and everyone will be happy. So then you would say, yeah, fine, I'm happy with my slice of the cake. Bob's your uncle. Everyone talks about it in Tynwald to give the overview from the minister, and then you make your vote. And everybody then should really be happy because they've had so much chance for consultation.
Well, even if they aren't, if there are 24 members, each with their own opinions, which they're fully entitled to have, you can't have a situation where a myriad of personal issues get in the way of voting a budget through. So I think when you get to budget day, you vote for the budget. Where I would, and I think Andrew alluded to it to some extent there, from the private sector, you're reviewing your accounts constantly, to some extent weekly, but certainly in a full extent monthly. The political and bureaucratic system jumps from year to year, and so it's the degree of activity, focus, and quality of reporting during the year that has to change.
Okay. You're making notes. Anything you want to say?
No, I agree with what Chris said, but I think it is difficult. I think government, we can't get to a situation where it stalls, and I think it's absolutely right. But I would welcome a review of that budget process. I'd welcome how it's presented to the public, so the public have a greater input into it, and a bit more time to allow members to have a little bit more time to understand it, because it is a complex document.
And you take that on board as a new member, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's our bit on the budget. It's fascinating. And thank you for your refreshing input on that. We have more to come.